Welcome to NMWA xChange, a spinoff of the award-winning pandemic live stream series VMA NMWA. I'm Addie Gayoso, NMWA's senior educator. Hello, viewers, and thank you for joining us. As always, we have enabled the live transcription, which you can show or hide by clicking the CC button in Zoom. Also, feel free to add your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will do our best to address them during our conversation today. Each month, as many of you know, hosts from NMWA are joined by special guests to center women creatives. We consider topics relevant to our world and offer insight into collaborations NMWA is fostering while its building is closed for renovation. During this time of change, we are excited to exchange ideas with our guests and viewers. Last month, we spoke with a few of our curatorial colleagues about some new works that have entered the collection, and you should definitely keep an eye out for when the museum reopens. If you missed the show, I'll put the link in the chat. You can check out any of our past episodes on our playlist in YouTube. Today's show is a special one as it marks the 12th episode of NMWA xChange, as well as the 1-year mark of the museum's renovation. I'm happy to introduce my program co-creator and co-host, Ginny Traynor, NMWA's Associate Curator. Hey, Ginny.
Hi, Addie. Hi, everyone. I am really looking forward to our discussion today because we have not one, not two, but 3 amazing guests who are going to give us all a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, of our massive renovation project that is going on right now at the museum. As I'm sure a lot of you know, we have undertaken an extensive renovation of our historic building, and we are about halfway through the process. Been at it for about a year at this point. So we thought, what better point in time than to kind of check in and hear about what's been done, what's going on, how things are going to be different, what things are going to stay the same. And before I introduce our amazing panelists, I just want to say that the renovations, the much needed renovations of the building that will help us carry on into the future to champion women in the arts, to preserve their artwork, has really been made possible financially by the generosity of the museum's friends and members who have made gifts and pledges to our Space to Soar campaign. And if you're interested in making your own contribution, you can find out more about that on our website. As we are talking, I'm just going to scroll through a couple of images, some behind the scenes images to give you an idea of what things look like at the building right now. Here are the doors that many of you who've been to the museum might recognize. They are in this protective casing of wood right now. And I also wanted to mention that even though the building itself is closed, we are obviously still hard at work doing online programming such as this, but also activating the building on the exterior with artwork. And this is a view of an artwork that was done for us by the graphic artist, street artist, Miss Shalove. That is still up. I believe it will be up through the end of October. And keep your eyes peeled because later on this year, we will be putting up another work on this New York Avenue side of the building. So keep an eye out for that if you're in the area. So without further ado, I would like to introduce everybody to our 3 guests today. We have Sandra Vicchio, who is the lead design architect of this project. We have Cara Versace, the architect of record, and Wendy Jessup, a conservator who specializes in preventive conservation. Hello to you all, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Ginny, for having us. I know we're all delighted, and I couldn't be joined by 2 more wonderful teammates than I have here. So I'm the prime on the project and the design architect. So my job is to lead the design of the project. So how things are going to look, how they're going to feel, what the materials are, and also to lead the project team. My team is incredibly outstanding, and I'm fortunate to work with every one of them. Many of the details of the execution for this project are going to fall to Cara. She's leading the charge on the architect of record side. So Cara.
Thanks, Sandra. And I second that. This team has just been incredible to work with, and this project has just been amazing. So I'm Cara Versace with Marshall Craft Associates. We're the architect of record for this project, and that basically means we take the lead on the documentation of the drawings and the specifications for the contractor to build the project. And we are led by Sandra, as she mentioned, and she really does a great job of leading us in the correct direction and coordinating everything with the museum. And we're very fortunate to work with Wendy, who has just been a wealth of knowledge and it's just wonderful to work with.
Well, thank you, Cara and Sandra. I'm Wendy Jessup of Wendy Jessup and Associates. I'm based in Arlington, Virginia. As Jenny said, I'm a conservator in private practice, and I specialize in preventive conservation. And for over 30 years, I have been very sort of focused on how do you prevent damage from happening? How do you prevent damage from happening from the environment? And I really love working with design professionals on the renovation or construction of new buildings, because that's an opportunity to build it properly or to renovate the building properly. So I've been involved with the museum since I did a preliminary conservation assessment about in 2007, and I've been involved in this project ever since.
Well, thank you for that, you guys, and explaining a little bit about your roles in the project. I'm showing this great picture here of our museum director, Susan Fisher Sterling, in the center there in the orange jacket, with some of the many women, including yourselves, on this project team. I think we'll get into this a little bit more about, women in construction and women in architecture. But I'm first really curious to know, and Sandra, I think, I'll start with you, but Cara and Wendy, is, if you want to jump in as well, what drew you to this renovation project in particular? Because it's renovation and it's restoration. How do you balance those two things?
Well, for me, for about 25 years, I've really focused on our cultural heritage. So buildings that embrace lifelong learning. I know before this webcam started, we were all talking about our secondary school educations, but we learn beyond that in college. And then I love the idea of learning throughout life. So this project, I got involved largely through Wendy initially. And this project touches multiple aspects of our cultural future, which will become our heritage, but women, art, history, preservation, and architecture. So from my perspective, what's not to love about doing a project like this? In response to the other part of your question, I think the balance of renovation and restoration is really an interesting kind of distinction in our profession. Renovations take things that are existing and make them new again. Restoration attempts to put everything back the way it was. So in this project, we're restoring the most important historic elements of the building to keep those for the future. It's a heroic, beautiful building made of really nice materials in a great location. But the renovation work will allow us to make the spaces inside much more contemporary and to function in the way that a contemporary museum has to work. And that also will improve sustainability and object preservation. So I know Cara and Wendy can probably expand on those points.
Yeah, it's actually been a great project to work on. And what drew me to it was just the museum itself and its mission. And it's such a wonderful mission, and it's true to my heart, really. And the project from a technical aspect is really interesting because it's the building has to function and it has to preserve art, but at the same time, it's such a beautiful shell, and it was built in 1908 as a Masonic temple. And one of the interesting things was, women weren't allowed in some of the public parts of the building originally, and now it's houses an institution that celebrates and champions women. So I think it's just an interesting piece of history there. But the actual technical pieces of the renovation, and you can see right there, just trying to figure out what parts of the building to preserve, how to preserve them, and then how to make it all work with its new function as a museum when it was originally a Masonic temple. So it's an interesting puzzle.
I don't know that I can add much more to that, because I work with the movable properties on the inside, but I look at the way in which the building performs and what the plans are that the architects and the engineers have put together. And, does it meet the needs of the collections? And what are some of the limitations of the building? And what can we do in order to preserve both the building and the collections that it houses, and make the collections accessible to the users? And I think that's what really excites me about this. Also, the fact that we're able to preserve this incredibly iconic structure and show the artwork in this structure.
Thank you so much. I think I'd love to know a little bit more about where we are in the actual construction process, right? We've both said, Jenny and I've said, we're about a year in now, and we're kind of wondering a little bit more about what's taken place already, what's currently being worked on. I was able to, I mentioned earlier, to go for a hard hat tour last week, which was wonderful to actually be in the space again. But from a novice's eye, I'd love to just hear from your perspective, sort of where are we with this project?
Well, we're making progress. I think the big piece that's largely behind us now is the demolition. So that's a tricky part of the process. You find things you didn't know you were going to find, or things aren't quite the way they were drawn. So that's very normal in a project like this, and the design and construction team has to work together to solve problems. Cara's been doing a good amount of that kind of thing. And now they're starting the build back. So we're starting, I think you must have seen when you went through last week, like on the 6th and 5th floors, the partitions for the offices are going in, the mechanical systems are going in. So they'll work from the top down, which makes sense because you want the messiest part at the door while you're, finishing up the building. And I don't know, Cara, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's a pretty good summary. And yeah, that's the build back is kind of is an exciting part, but I also really just enjoy the demolition and just kind of seeing the old bones of the building. And it's especially probably for you guys, seeing the building in that state when you had lived in it for so long is probably an interesting juxtaposition for you. But you see all the possibilities when everything's out, and then you can just imagine what it's going to be like in the future. So
yeah, even this image, seeing, this is the performance hall, and members have been there, you realize immediately it's missing all the seats, but they've just, they've been ripped out, and it somehow looks smaller to me.
It's so funny. We were saying that as well. We were on, I think, the 3rd floor where a lot of our gallery space had been, and it feels like this, it's a really exciting empty shell. You can see all of sort of the terracotta tiles that sort of were usually under the plaster walls, and sort of seeing all the bones of the building, but it feels a lot smaller. So it's exciting to sort of to be in that shell in this particular moment, and also to be able to see where our passenger elevator was. It's now just this huge huge hole in the floor, which is pretty amazing. So just kind of having that opportunity to see that space. I'm curious for all of you, and maybe we can start with Wendy. What is the most exciting part of this project for you individually? And maybe we'll start with Wendy.
Oh my goodness. I think for me, the most exciting part of this project is yet to come, is to see it finished is to see it finished. There have been so many challenges, particularly because I'm working with the collections and thinking about access and use of the collections. How do the collections move around in the building? How can we properly store them? And the building itself has got some limitations, as I mentioned before. I mean, can't imagine what's involved in how to move a large painting around a collection storage space that's got columns in it. We can't move the columns because that's the structure there. And so how do we best put all of these components together so that it does work? I love these puzzles anyway. So that's an exciting thing for me, is working with the puzzles and all of the three-dimensional pieces that have to go together. But I think the culmination will be, having been involved with the collection and with the building for 15, 16 years, to see the final product, to see the users, and to be able to see the exhibitions as they go in. So I'm thrilled with looking forward. So that's the exciting part for me.
Thanks, Wendy. Sandra, did you want to talk a little bit about the mock-up of this gallery? I know that's an exciting
Sure.
part
So,
for you.
moving forward to what we might see when it's finished, we actually had the contractor build a mock-up of a gallery space. So this is on the 4th floor. And the image you see on the right is very much like what you will see when the galleries are finished. So it's a big transformation of the gallery spaces for NMWA. Cara's team has integrated the mechanical, so it goes through that little slit at the bottom of the wall and the slit at the top of the wall. So there used to be big grills on the vertical face, and it made it very hard for the curators to hang art sometimes because they had these air vents and
Ginny is nodding.
where you want to put art. So we have maximized the amount of wall space. A beautiful new, very sophisticated ceiling system, excellent lighting system design, kind of very high quality gallery lighting with our consultant Flux. And then the image on the left, I took that because I think it's pretty interesting to look at this very finished space, which is in only a mock-up at this point, in the context of where the construction is now. So you see the kind of reddish color up above, that's the terracotta, which is the way they used to fireproof the steel back in the early 20th century. So now we use spray fireproofing and other strategies, but then they wrapped it in terracotta tile. So very common inside a building of this age. And you just kind of can get a sense of the messiness of the construction process versus the kind of crispness of the galleries when they're finished.
Thank you
Cara,
for sharing those
you wanna-
images. Yeah,
Yeah.
Cara, do you want to share?
I mean, you've been worrying about what goes between those two walls an awful lot.
Yeah, as Sandra mentioned, there's it's been an interesting design challenge, interesting detailing challenge, and an interesting construction challenge to make all of these very intricate puzzle pieces fit together. The building is a wedge shape, so you can't just have everything be an orthogonal perpendicular line. And Sandra and Michelle, who works with Sandra, know this better than anybody. The ceilings are very attest to that, because your ceiling grid is linear, but you have to find a way to mesh all those geometries together in a way that's very well designed and thought through. And then there's a lot of things that the building needs to function, like the return air grills. How do we do that in such a way that it doesn't take away from the art? So we thought through those very carefully to really make them all just kind of go away, so that your focus is truly on the artwork. And this is a great image here, just kind of showing how all the programmatic pieces fit together on the 4th floor, and that the mock-up is of one of those bays in the gallery, and the 4th floor just has a lot more programs in it as well. So it's just one piece of it, but it's such an important piece and such a tricky detail. So we really wanted to get that, see that ahead of time, to work out any issues ahead of time with how does all these pieces fit together.
I love that you showed some images of the mock-up gallery when I was on site. I was able to walk into it, which was really cool.
Okay.
And one of the folks who's working on our site actually had a drawing made by their daughter, and they hung it up in the gallery to test the lighting. And I just thought it was just a future work of art potentially for the Women's Museum. I thought that was so cool. So thank you for sharing those images. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention about the fourth floor. You know, as Wendy mentioned, thinking about the collections and access to the collections. One of the exciting things coming out of this project is that we have more gallery space than we had in the past. And a lot of that is on the fourth floor, which you see right here. So in addition to the long gallery, on the main floor, the mezzanine, and then our special exhibition space on the second floor and collections on the third, we now have additional gallery space. So more of our collection is able to be on view.
And this whole floor, I think, is such a programmatic win for the museum, because you have the galleries that they were just pointing to, so a place to see art. And then we reorganized the library, so a place to learn about art. And then the collections, some of the collections are stored adjacent to the library there in that very carefully coordinated collection storage furniture, which Wendy and I will say Michelle, who works with me, worked on tirelessly. And then at the bottom of the image, you see the sort of three square table arrangements, and that's the education studio. So it's a place where people can do hands-on art. So we're making things better for Addie and Ginny, so therefore it must be a win.
We really appreciate it. We're so excited about the
Well,
studio
we're really
space.
excited.
It's such a gift for us. So yeah, and we're excited about the library too, and it's sort of increased functionality as well. I'm really, really excited about the fourth floor, and also, as Ginny said, just having, you know, it's the office space. So we have a pretty rigid footprint, right? We talked about intractables.
Right.
There are certain things about the building we can't change. And we have a pretty rigid footprint. So we're right downtown DC, and we're sort of blocked in by other buildings, but it's exciting because you're such like thoughtful designers in terms of how you reorganized office space to sort of constrict that and then enlarge our gallery space. So there's really more public facing space, which is really, really exciting, I think, for everyone on staff. So yeah, this is great.
So I think we touched upon it a little bit, but this idea about how so much of the work that's being done is not going to be visible, but that is very, very important. So I don't know if Cara or Wendy, you can speak to that a little bit more about what kind of hidden improvements are going into this.
Sure. So one of the main focuses of the renovation is to improve the interior conditions to help preserve the collections. And one of the ways in which we do that is to create a bubble around the collection spaces, the galleries and the collection storage areas that have their own interior conditions that are different from the adjacent spaces. And you'll never really perceive that or see that when you're walking through the spaces, except that you'll know that the temperature and humidity controls of the spaces that you're in are really there and can be fine-tuned for the collections that are on display or being stored. And Wendy knows about that even more than anyone, I think.
And likewise, I think that's going to be a major improvement, because what we've done is we've built this bubble on the interior that will maintain the relative humidity and the temperature in there, and we're not going to be affected by say the heat or rain from the outside. So it's really creating this space on the inside that is conducive to long-term preservation of the collections. Another thing that you won't see that's behind the scenes is the improvement of access for research and selection of paintings, getting things in and out. will make it much easier with the collection storage that has been reconfigured and redesigned with new equipment also. That will make it much easier for curators and other custodians of the collections to be able to get the pieces, put them on display, lend them to other venues. And so that's a lot of the behind the scenes working conditions for the staff have been or will be improved through this process. And consequently, it will also improve the services that are given and the amenities that are given to the public as they come into the space. So there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes on. And the more that we can do to make it easier for the collection storage folks, for the facilities folks to do their jobs, the better result in terms of the overall presentation of materials and the work of the museum to become a space for learning. So I think that's the behind the scenes materials and the work that is really going to make a difference in the long run.
And one of the things that will help with seeing art, since I'm sort of interested in people being able to see the art, is there's a system above the ceiling in the galleries. So, you know, the women at NMWA are fairly fearless when it comes to putting together these exhibitions. And they'll bring in things that I would not have imagined you could have displayed in these galleries, but there they are, and they do it, and they do it beautifully. So now above the ceiling is a system of support so that they can hang heavy pieces of art, and those ceiling panels can be removed and adjusted to accommodate the hangers. So they can hang heavy pieces of art almost anywhere in the gallery, which is not, you did not have that flexibility before. You were very limited, and now you have a known system for being able to do that.
Yeah, as contemporary art gets bigger, and gets heavier, and using different types of materials, it's really critical to be able to accommodate that so that you're able to present the diversity of materials, the diversity of artistic thought and presentation. So it's all so exciting, and again, it's what we're going to see in the future.
It is really exciting. When we were walking through with Gordon Umberger, who's on our side, sort of managing this enormous project, he was pointing out all the things that we won't see with our naked eye when the museum is reopened. And one of those things was he was talking about that sort of hanging system and how exciting it is for us to have that. So, so many exciting things that kind of that go unnoticed or truly unseen by visitors, but really do, as Wendy said, make their overall experience of the museum better. I want to switch gears just a little bit. We had such a great conversation in our preliminary call before we went live about sort of your individual sort of paths and experiences as women. And I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that. So I'm curious if each of you can share a little bit about your educational and professional journeys and how, sort of what challenges you may have faced or overcome as women in those particular respective fields.
Well, I guess I'll start. So somewhere along the line in about 7th grade, I decided I wanted to be an architect. I'm not really sure I knew what that meant, but it seemed like a cool idea. So here I am all these years later, and I think the people in school pretty much told me that wouldn't be a possibility. So, you know, I moved along. I went to college. I was fortunate to go to UVA, where I got a great education. I think about 50% of my graduating class was women. And so I never had the idea, you know, from that point on that there was any difference between men and women. But then I began practicing in the field, and I can remember being an intern architect at a meeting with 35 or 40 people, and I was the only woman in the room, and I was the one taking notes. And it wasn't until all these years later when I went in to give a presentation to the board at NMWA to update them on the status of the project, where I counted over 40 people in the room, all women except for 2 men, and they were taking the notes. So for me, it was finally good to see women in the roles where they're leading the institution and fearlessly leading the institution. I mean, so much credit goes to your founder for her vision for this and the board who have carried it forward. So it's changed, and it probably hasn't changed as quickly as I wish it would. And I'm going to bet that Wendy had an experience a little different from mine, and maybe Cara's was even different in a better way, I'm hoping.
Well, okay, since you did mention it, I began my career about 40 years ago, and back then conservators were considered to be the people that would just fix things together. And now that's what we call a bench conservator.
Yeah.
You know, they're very highly skilled in understanding the material science and various ways of doing the treatment work. I was trained in Asian paintings of all things, which was a very, very specialized field, and had also became really interested in how to prevent the damage from happening. I became involved in the renovation of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and really started my education there. There was nobody doing what I was doing. There was nobody trying to put together the ideas of facilities and how facilities can protect and preserve and contribute to it. So a lot of the things that I've done over my career have been focused, self-taught, but along the way I have found absolutely wonderful mentors in the facilities and in the engineering areas. And when we were planning this, I think one of the things that came up as we were planning this, we were talking, and I used to talk like this. I used to talk with this really high voice. I trained myself because I am a short stature woman, and I trained myself to drop my voice so that I could increase my credibility. So on a personal level, a lot of my work has been done on personal growth, finding the right mentors, taking the opportunities, and learning how to present myself with credibility. And so that's been a challenge, but it's also been extremely rewarding. And again, as Sandra said, I couldn't have done this without the vision of your founder. I mean, of being able to proceed and have an opportunity to work on a collection and with a staff and on a building like this. So it's great.
And my experience is somewhat similar in some ways and different in others. I just kind of fell into architecture around high school. I always loved math, I always loved art, and I thought it was kind of a nice meld between the two. And I also just really enjoy figuring out how to make things work, but in a very simple, clean way, very elegant. So it all kind of fit in that realm for me, but no one ever told me, no, you shouldn't do this because you're a woman or women aren't in that field. I mean, that was never even a question. I was always, I was encouraged and supported and all that. But I have had many experiences, particularly when I was a younger architect, being the only woman in the room, is particularly in a construction site, and having to kind of, be confident and in my role, not overconfident, not overextend myself and pretend that I knew something I didn't know, but just, understand that I was the expert and I had a role in this project and just to stand firm. And I don't know if that was so much about being a woman or being more on the younger side. It might have been more that, but at that point, the barrier was only me. And I just had to make sure that I didn't let myself hold myself back. And my firm has always been extremely encouraging to women. In fact, I think we had more women in the technical fields and technical roles than we did have men at some point. So it's been a little bit of a different journey, but there's still, you still kind of face some of the perceived barriers in a way, but it's just trying to figure out ways to deal with them and trying to not let yourself put those barriers on your own.
Yeah, I really appreciate you all sharing those personal experiences. Thank you. We have this great picture up again that Ginny mentioned earlier, and we're wondering, you all are taking charge of this project, but there are a lot of women who are working on this, and I'm wondering how other women are playing roles in the renovation of Women's Museum. Share a little bit more.
Well, we have an awful lot of women in leadership roles on this project. Women leading, well, there's a group of women on the contracting team right there. Our lead mechanical engineer, our lead plumbing engineer, Cara, Wendy, our lead envelope engineer, structural engineer, are, you know, they're women, and partly, I guess it's because of the nature of the project, but really it's because they're competent, intelligent, capable people who are really terrific to work with. And one of the folks who's been involved is our retail partner, Eileen Ritter. And she came on as the retail designer, so helping to redesign the shop, which is an important part of museum operations. And then we expanded her role to help with the finer quality design of key spaces like the Great Hall and the Performance Hall. And she came along and she wasn't completely satisfied with these standard materials we were finding, and was able to encourage the museum to embrace custom textiles. So, you know, earlier today I was on calls and emails coordinating the delivery of these initial strike-offs, which are like the samples of the textiles. So we'll have custom textiles in the Great Hall, also designed by a woman, and another custom textile in the Performance Hall. So we're really grateful for the work Eileen's done on that front. And gosh, Cara, I mean, you work with women on this project pretty much every day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As Sandra mentioned, we have a lot of our engineers are women on our own team. Veronica Pliszka, who's with MCA, she's in that photo as well. Just an amazing woman. Really talented architect, and just super organized, and she's been instrumental in this. And of course we also have a strong team of men as well, that also have great and important roles as well. So it's not only women on the team, but there are just a lot of phenomenal women.
I'm wondering how, you know, is this project different in that regards from other projects you've worked on? Are there a lot more women involved in this project, or is this something that you are encountering more and more as more women go into these fields?
I think that there are more women on this project, and like I say, it's not just because they're women, but I would assume in a firm, if you're looking at a team and you have an equally qualified man and woman on a project like this, you're going to put the woman on the project, right? Because it makes good sense. But I was just thinking, as we were looking at this picture and going through all these different roles, when I was starting in architecture, it wouldn't have been possible to, I mean, working with a woman mechanical engineer, that was a rare finding. You know, they were architects, interior designers. Oh, we have a woman civil engineer too, who's done a lot of the work on this project, who's been fabulous. And so it's changing. And I think that's a great thing. And maybe this project will be an example for other projects that maybe aren't necessarily so focused on a mission associated with women. But I'm grateful for the change. I like working with men. I think it's, you know, I don't like to judge people on gender or anything else. It's really the job that they do and how they do it. But this team, I think, has been particularly great to work with.
Yeah, I've been on other teams and have often been the only woman on the team. But there have, I think it's slowly creeping. I think it's your question was, are there more women on this team? Yes. Are
Yes.
more women entering the field? Yes. So I think it's all happening slowly, but I think there are opportunities that are being seen at this point.
I see we do have one question that came in. Someone was asking about the envelope and what an envelope engineer is. Could you just briefly explain that? The only reason I know is because I've talked to you guys.
So the envelope is the face of the wall on the outside to the face of the wall on the inside, and also the roof and the foundation. So people like Wendy worry very, very much about how that performs to protect the art. So she doesn't want temperature and relative humidity going up a lot on the inside. You know, transitions are supposed to be minimal and very gradual. I've learned a lot from Wendy. I hope you're doing a good job here. So the envelope engineer worries about the composition of that wall and how we manage and mitigate vapor and temperature transmission.
Right.
So Cara, do you want to talk a little bit about what we did we had to preserve the exterior, right? Because that's part of our preservation. But Cara can talk about what we did inside that wall to make it perform better. And Wendy will have.
Can I say one thing first? But I don't mean to jump in on you, but I think,
No, you should.
it's really important to remember that the building itself is the first line of defense for the contents of the building. And depending upon how it performs with respect to the external influences that are placed on it, such as sunlight, such as rain, such as, all of the weather and climatic influences that are on it. And in the DC area, as many of you know, we live in a very hot and humid climate. We also get cold winter seasons. And we've been getting more and more rain. And with climate change, it's going to increase. Our challenges will increase there. So consequently, we have to think about how do we protect the contents from what's outside. Oftentimes, in this climate, we have to put in a mechanical system to be able to manage the environment. But with that in mind, if you put that in there, you got to be able to hold that conditioned air inside the building. You don't want it to go outside. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of resources. And as we've known in some studies, it can damage the building structure itself. Consequently, the design team has to come up with solutions to be able to make that container work and perform properly.
Yeah, and that's absolutely perfect. It's kind of a great lead in. And so what Janine was one of the is the project manager for the envelope. She really studied the exterior of the building, the existing exterior of the building, which is masonry. And masonry is naturally a porous material. So the water naturally comes in a little bit, but it's also it also helps to manage the temperature control a little bit because masonry will absorb heat and also let out cool. So it's helpful and it's a challenge at the same time. So the first thing she did was look at the existing masonry on the building and kind of see where there are any issues, any repairs that needed to happen. Are all the joints between the masonry units performing? How are the windows doing in between? Are they, do they need to be replaced? And then once you get all of that working properly, it's now how do we maintain, how do we prevent wide swings in temperature on the interior when there's swings of temperature on the exterior? And as Wendy mentioned, how do you prevent all of your interior conditions from going outside? So we increase the thermal insulation. We use spray foam insulation to really kind of help become a barrier between the inside and the outside. And one other things we did, just kind of while I'm thinking about the wall and the galleries, we actually separated the interior wall from the exterior wall by about a little over a little more than a foot. And we have run the main mechanical ducts in that interstitial space so that they don't take up room above the gallery ceilings. But that also kind of creates another interstitial space between the two that helps mitigate a temperature variations through the gallery. So it's a really complex problem and a very complex technical challenge. Yeah, is a solution. So it seems simple, just a wall, but it's actually we had a lot of thought go into it.
And it's not just temperature; it's
Right.
moisture. It's moisture vapor.
vapor.
You know, there are ways in which moisture vapor will go through a will go through a wall assembly, and it's not just the temperature that we're feeling. We have moisture vapor migration from, and it's a very complex. There's some physics that's involved in that. So how do we maintain some way of buffering and refusing this exchange of moisture vapor and heat?
Yeah.
And this will make the space much more comfortable for the people who are in the space, as well as for the objects. And I'm sure Jenny can speak more to this, but for those of you who are not sort of museum people, it's important for us to have all these sort of protected spaces, because it makes it easier for us to be able to sort of borrow works from other institutions. We sort of be a better steward of our own collection, which is really important. So all of this is going to improve sort of our ability to just care for any work that is within our walls.
It's also
the
an
thing,
energy conservation. There's energy conservation that's in there, and the expense that goes into providing conditioned spaces. Sorry, Sandra, I talked.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just going to say, one of the things that Janine's firm did at the beginning of the project was they did some thermographic imaging of the exterior. So that let us all see where the leaky parts were in the building. And you may have some of those images on your website. I can't remember, but viewers, I can't remember. Anyway, so like the picture shows a bright yellow where there's heat coming out of the building. And so we had to focus specifically on some of those areas to manage. What you really want to do is, keep the temperature and relative humidity constant, because when it changes, it's damaging. You could sort of think about it like if you have paper stuck to a milk carton, and you pull the milk carton out of your kitchen on a hot summer day, and the paper's going to get messed up. So that's a really basic description of what we're trying to avoid.
And the other challenge within the building, because of the inherent performance of the building with the Great Hall, it's a 2-story space where there is stratification of environment in that space, and then there are all of the stairwells and the elevator shafts. And we look at, and in fact, the engineers on this project, both the envelope engineers and the mechanical design engineers, had to look carefully at the way in which the air moves through the building and the way that moisture moves. Hot air rises, we know that. And so what happens to it? How can we avoid that? How can we protect and prevent that from causing damage to the collection and to the building itself?
So you'll see nice new doors between the elevator and stair lobbies and the gallery spaces. They were not there before, but those are to separate the kind of chimney activity from the main gallery spaces.
Well, thanks to all of you so much for joining us. I am certainly even more excited now to see the building, and I'm so excited. It's going to be phenomenal, and thank you all so much for your work on this project.
I feel like we should have, I feel like we said this earlier, but I think this could be part of a series. Maybe we'll bother Wendy and Cara and Sandra to come back, because I could listen to them talk about this project for days. It's so fascinating.
I think we'd be delighted.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time. Thank you all so much. And just again, a thanks to the Friends of the Museum who've made gifts and pledges to the Space to Soar campaign. If you're interested in learning more about the project, the renovation images, as well as how you might donate to this very extensive project. I put the link in the chat. Again, thanks to our viewers as always for tuning in today. And please join us if you're able for our next episode of NMWA xChange, which is called Past, Present, and Future with artist Diane Smith. That's going to be on Tuesday, October 11th at 12 noon Eastern, as always. When we will discuss the artist's works that blend historical and contemporary images to investigate place and identity. And I'll add that to the chat. And I just, again, thank you all so much for your time today. I know you're extremely busy people. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you all. And thanks for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.